When people ask me how to stay calm, how to avoid anger no matter what others say or do, I always begin with this truth: anger is fast. It's sharp, it's instant, it comes rushing in before we even realize what's happening. And because it's fast, it tricks us into believing that we have no control over it. But the truth is, we do. Control doesn't happen by suppressing anger or pretending it isn't there. Control begins by slowing down what anger wants to speed up. Think about the last time you snapped at someone. Maybe it was at work, maybe in your family, maybe while driving in traffic. In that moment, anger felt like a reflex. You didn't plan it. You didn't pause to consider the words you were about to throw out. You reacted. That's what anger does. It hijacks the speed of your mind and your mouth. And if you don't learn to interrupt that speed, you will always believe that calmness is out of your reach. So what's the interruption? It's the pause. The pause is small, it's quiet, it's subtle, but it's where real strength lies. A pause is the moment you buy yourself before anger spends you. And it doesn't have to be long. Sometimes it's a single breath. Sometimes it's looking away for a second. Sometimes it's biting your tongue just long enough for your brain to catch up with your emotions. But that pause is not weakness. That pause is a decision. Now, here's why the pause works. When you feel anger, it activates the amygdala, the emotional center of your brain. The amygdala reacts in milliseconds. That's why anger feels uncontrollable. But when you pause, even for a few seconds, you shift the activity from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that thinks, plans, and chooses. In other words, the pause gives your rational mind a chance to take back the wheel. You're not suppressing the anger, you're giving yourself time to decide what to do with it. That's power under control. And notice this, the pause doesn't mean you're ignoring the offense or letting people walk all over you. It means you are refusing to let someone else's behavior dictate your state of mind. Anger says, act now. Calmness says, wait, think, choose. That difference in timing is the difference between a fight that escalates and a conflict that dissolves. I want you to picture it like this: when you light a match, it only burns for a few seconds before it dies. If you blow on it immediately, it flares up. But if you wait, the flame disappears. Anger is the same. It feels huge in the moment, but it has a short life if you don't feed it. The pause is your way of refusing to blow on the flame. And when you stop feeding it, calmness naturally takes over. Now let's get practical, because it's one thing to talk about pausing, it's another thing to live it. How do you pause in real time, in the middle of a heated conversation, in the moment your buttons are being pushed? Start by listening to your body. Anger always shows up in the body first. Your heart rate increases, your face gets warm, your hands clench, your jaw tightens. These are signals. Most people ignore them and go straight into reaction mode. But if you train yourself to notice these signals, you can catch anger before it spills out. The tightening in your chest becomes a reminder, pause. The heat in your face becomes a signal, breathe. The tension in your hands becomes a cue, wait. Another way is to build phrases you use as anchors. When you feel the surge, repeat something like, not yet, or hold on, or I choose calm. It doesn't matter what the words are. What matters is that they create space between your feeling and your response. That space is everything. There's also something deeply philosophical about the pause. The ancient Stoics taught that we don't control what happens to us, but we do control how we interpret it. The pause is the moment we decide what meaning to attach to an event. If someone insults you, without a pause, you immediately accept their words as an attack, and anger follows. But with a pause, you can ask, is this about me or about them? Is this worth my peace? Do I want to let their words decide the kind of person I become? Suddenly, you're no longer a slave to your emotions. You're the one steering them. And I want to be clear, Pausing doesn't mean you never confront someone. It doesn't mean you let everything slide. It simply means that when you do respond, it comes from a place of strength instead of impulse. There's a big difference between reacting and responding. A reaction is automatic, emotional, often regrettable. A response is measured, intentional, and much more powerful. The pause is the bridge between the two. If you think about it, some of the biggest regrets in life come from what we said or did in anger. Words you can't take back, actions that damaged trust, relationships that fractured. But I've never heard anyone regret pausing. No one looks back and says, I wish I had shouted faster. I wish I had lost my temper sooner. What they regret is not waiting long enough to let wisdom catch up. The pause saves you from those regrets, even in leadership, in parenting, in relationships. People remember how you handle your anger. They remember if you explode or if you hold steady. Calm leaders earn trust. Calm parents teach discipline. Calm partners build safety. And all of that begins not with extraordinary talent or intelligence, but with the ordinary act of pausing. So here's the challenge. The next time you feel anger rise, don't try to fight it head on. Don't try to deny it or bury it. Just pause. Breathe once before you speak. Count to 3 before you move. Let that small silence remind you that you are in charge, not your anger. Because calmness is not about never being provoked. It's about never letting provocation control you. And the pause is how you take that control back. So when you leave here today and life throws its insults, its frustrations, its provocations at you, remember this anger may be fast, but wisdom is patient. And if you can hold that pause, even for a moment, you'll find that calm isn't something you chase, it's something you choose. One of the biggest reasons we get angry at people is because we make the mistake of confusing who they are with what they do. We collapse their identity into their behavior. Someone snaps at us and suddenly, in our mind, they're rude, they're selfish, they're the enemy. Someone ignores us and we decide they don't value us, they don't respect us. We don't just see the action, we attach a meaning to it, and that meaning almost always fuels our anger. But here's the truth: behavior and identity are not the same thing. People act out of pain, stress, insecurity, fear, or habits they may not even be aware of. And when you learn to separate the two, you unlock one of the greatest shields against anger. You realize that the behavior might be harsh, but the person is still human. And that shift in perspective pulls you out of the cycle of reacting and into the space of understanding. Now, let's be clear. Understanding is not the same as excusing. This isn't about tolerating disrespect or pretending words don't sting. It's about choosing to look deeper than the surface so you don't get trapped in anger that only harms you. Because anger always personalizes. It says, they did this to me. But calmness distances. It says, they did this, but it may not be about me. That's a radical shift. Think of it this way. If a child throws a tantrum, we don't say, this child is evil. We say, they're tired, they're hungry, they don't know how to regulate their emotions yet. We separate the child from the behavior, and because of that, we respond with patience. But as adults, we forget to do this with each other. A colleague snaps at us in a meeting, and we don't think they're stressed, they're carrying pressure from home. We think they disrespected me. And then anger takes the wheel. But the same principle applies. Most people's behavior is a reflection of their inner world, not a deliberate attack on yours. When someone is short-tempered, it's usually because they're carrying more than they can handle. When someone is dismissive, it may be because they feel overlooked themselves. When someone is cruel, it often reveals more about their own wounds than about your worth. If you can train yourself to see that, you'll stop handing your peace over to every passing behavior. There's also a deeper psychological angle here. Human beings project. What we struggle with internally often leaks out in how we treat others. A person insecure about their own intelligence might constantly belittle yours. A person who feels invisible might constantly fight to dominate attention. A person who feels powerless might try to control everything around them. If you take their behavior as a mirror of your value, you get trapped in anger. But if you recognize it as a mirror of their struggle, you find empathy, and empathy diffuses anger faster than anything else. That doesn't mean you don't set boundaries. Boundaries are essential, but boundaries are most effective when they're set from calmness, not rage. Because calm boundaries are respected, while angry ones often escalate conflict. Separating the person from their behavior allows you to say, I won't allow you to treat me this way, without needing to hate the person behind the action. And that's a level of control anger will never give you. Philosophically, this is also about freeing yourself. If you keep attaching someone's behavior to your sense of self, you will spend your life on an emotional roller coaster. One compliment lifts you, one insult drops you. You become reactive to every opinion, every word, every gesture. But when you learn to separate, you step off the ride, you realize their behavior is about them. My response is about me. And in that moment, you reclaim your freedom. There's a story I often think about: two monks walking together when they encounter a rude stranger. One monk fumes about it for miles, repeating the insult, replaying the moment. Finally, the other monk says, "You're still carrying him, but I left him at the river." That's the trap of personalizing people's behavior. You carry them with you long after the moment has passed. But when you separate the person from their action, you set the burden down and think about the relationships in your own life. How many conflicts could be softened if you practiced this? How many times could you avoid escalation simply by asking, what pain might be behind this? Instead of assuming, they're against me. We spend so much energy trying to change people's behavior through our anger. But anger rarely changes anyone. What changes people is calm presence, consistent boundaries, and sometimes quiet empathy. This approach doesn't just protect your peace, it transforms the interaction. Because when you don't mirror someone's negativity back to them, you interrupt the cycle. You become the variable they weren't expecting. Instead of two fires feeding each other, you become the water that cools it down. That's not weakness. That's strength in its purest form. And here's the paradox: the more you separate people from their behavior, the more influence you actually gain. Why? Because people can feel when they're seen beyond their mistakes. They can sense when you're not reducing them to their worst moment. And that kind of calm presence disarms defenses, opens doors, and often invites people to rise above their own behavior. So the next time someone lashes out, instead of fusing their behavior with their identity, step back. Tell yourself, this is behavior. This is not the whole person. That reminder creates just enough space for calmness to breathe. And in that space, you'll find choices that anger would have stolen from you. Because here's the truth: every person you meet is fighting battles you cannot see. Some battles are small, some are lifelong, some are invisible, even to them. And if you can remember that, if you can look past the behavior to the humanity underneath, then you will discover that staying calm is not about ignoring wrongs. It's about refusing to let those wrongs rewrite who you are. So carry this with you: people are more than the sum of their mistakes. And when you can see that, when you can separate the action from the person, you'll discover a peace that no insult, no criticism, no outburst can steal from you. And maybe the most powerful part is this: you give yourself permission to be seen the same way. Because if others are more than their behavior, so are you. And that means your worst moment doesn't define you either. So the next time someone provokes you, don't confuse their behavior with their worth. See deeper, pause longer, choose calmer. And in doing so, you won't just avoid anger, you'll rise above it.